time throughout the ages. There's a little mystical surah, chapter in Quran that is considered to be like not a black hole, but like a dynamite, potent, complete Quran in and of itself, so to speak. And that is Al-Asr. And that surah means time throughout the ages. This word means time throughout the ages. The root of it being cited. We'll talk about cited again in a few minutes. But Asr. So Asr begins 2 hours before sunset. Simultaneously, let's jump back to ancient Kim for a moment. When the sun rises every day, it becomes Ra. It remains Ra until approximately 2 hours before sunset, at which time it goes into the vestibule of Asar. The transliteration of Osiris, actually the sound of Osiris, is Asar. So that 2 hours before sunset, in our understanding in ancient Kim, the sun transformed itself into Asar. 2 hours before sunset in the religion of Al-Islam, we make a prayer called Asr. The time throughout the ages, the changing of the time throughout the ages, it's the same meaning, it's the same word. I hope this is one of the simplest and strongest illustrations of what I meant at the beginning when I showed the slide of the area and how the languages are all intermingled and how the meanings of these principles therefore can be preserved. The words of power themselves, that when you study the sacred science of ancient Egypt, you realize we believed and understood that words have power, have a creative power, that these words are actually preserved in the Arabic, in the Hebrew, in other languages of that area, and that as we as scholars and students of ourselves need to get more deeply into these words and into these practices so that we'll begin to learn some very, very interesting things. I hope I've made that point. It is the structure of our book and of the research that we did. Next slide, please. There it is. Osiris, Asar, means time through the ages. Al-Asr, Al-Asr in Arabic means declining day or time throughout the ages. They are the same. Next slide. Next slide, please. The entranceway, this is a depiction of the principle of Amen or Aman, taken from one of Budge's books. And what you see in front of you there is a depiction at the time, I think of the 18th dynasty, when the priests of Aman were attempting to usurp the power of all the principles. You see there every single principle represented in one way or another and put together into what appears to be a kind of a hodgepodge of everything in an attempt to make Aman the one true God. It had to do with power, it had to do with, but what happened was an imbalance throughout the civilization was setting in which one priesthood took the power of the other principles, and the divine balance that we had established for tens of thousands of years came apart. It was time for it basically to come apart. It manifested in imperialism and many other things that I believe as we study our great history we'll understand in its proper light. The Atenists came to undo this and attempt to restore the divine order. This has nothing to do with the principle of Aman at all. The principle is universal, timeless, and extremely important. It has to do with the men who were at that time the priests of Aman and the ambitions that they had, which in our understanding created this imbalance. Well, our research began with this because in the Quran a very interesting thing takes place. There is a great deal in the Holy Quran about the Pharaoh and ancient Egypt and Moses, a great deal. And if in fact it is divine revelation, we need to study it with a fine-tooth comb, especially in terms of the roots of the words. Well, whenever the Pharaoh is mentioned in the Holy Quran, somebody is mentioned on a level or a par with the Pharaoh. It says Pharaoh and Haman, Haman. That's the Arabic transliteration of what is written in the Holy Quran by a man who had never studied. They said Pharaoh and Haman. And the way that "and" is used in the Arabic, it means that whoever this is on a level with the Pharaoh. Now, no one was on a level with the Pharaoh from time immemorial until this imbalance that I was just speaking of took place, where the high priest of Aman rose up for the first time and became on a level with the Pharaoh, and eventually the priest of Aman became the Pharaoh. And this is all during the time of the decadent and the downward thrust of our civilization. So right there in the Quran is a little teeny but powerfully important tidbit that Muhammad the man could never have known once again, pointing to the era of time, pointing to the Atenist movement, pointing to the whole era of the turnaround that took place there that involves Moses and that involved Akhenaten prior to Moses. In addition to that, you will find in the Holy Quran a surah, a chapter called the Mu'min, meaning the believer who has been a believer for some period of time. This is not just a believer in the oneness of God. This is a person who has proven himself for some period of time. In that surah, there's someone from amongst the Pharaoh and Haman's court, someone right there with them who actually disputes with the Pharaoh in a way that would have been totally inappropriate and impossible for anyone that wasn't part of the court. They're quotations, long involved quotations from this person. This Mu'min is in fact an Atenist. I do not know of another text on the planet outside of the original text themselves by Akhenaten in heralding the sun Atan that actually has a verbatim interchange between an Atenist and the Pharaoh, except for in the Quran, in the Holy Quran of Mecca. It is entitled Mu'min. And I would refer you to it. You'll have a tremendous adventure with it in the Holy Quran, particularly the Quran is translated by Yusuf Ali, that for me, in the English translation, has the strongest capturing of the poetry of Quran and the meaning at the same time. Next slide, please. I don't have much time. I'm going to move quickly and then open up for questions. This symbol just plain haunted me throughout the whole research of the book. There were a lot of things that unveiled themselves to myself and Thomas Goodwin during this. It was a very mystical experience. We did our research, but the deeper we went into our research, the more we started hearing and seeing. It was like something was just on the other side of a veil and just beckoned to us, and particularly around the feminine principle. And one of these things was the Ankh, and I couldn't leave it alone. And Thomas, who had been at this a much longer period of time, he was telling me, man, people have been trying for thousands of years to unravel the mystery of the Ankh. And I don't pretend to have unraveled it at all. But one of the meanings did come to me that I think is important, and I'd like to share with you today. Brother Smalls just walked in. Beautiful. Greetings. Hotep. Hotep. The Ankh itself continued to speak with me. And of course we know from the texts themselves that one of the meanings for the Ankh is water. Another of the meanings of the Ankh is